Today, I want to talk about neutral in fighting games, which is a very large topic that a lot of people struggle with. Neutral is one of the hardest things to learn in fighting games because there are simply just so many things that you have to consider, so many different tools and spacings that you have to think about, and it can be very daunting to figure out how to approach neutral and figure out what you're doing wrong in neutral. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's a way to simplify how neutral is played, and that's by breaking it down into three core concepts that I personally refer to as the triangle of neutral. These three core concepts you're going to find in pretty much every fighting game with any matchup, and understanding how they kind of go together is going to be very helpful for you. Those core concepts are going to be space control, whiff punishing, and approaching. These three concepts kind of form a rock, paper, scissors, so to speak, and understanding how they kind of go together and what they look like will help you figure out what you're doing wrong in neutral. So let's just get right into it. Let's talk about the first part of the RPS, I think, which is space control. So I'm going to use Ram for this, the character that I play in this game. Space control is usually big buttons that have long range, and the whole purpose of them is to control the space in front of your character. You want to stop the opponent from approaching you, or you want to try to stop the opponent from putting their own hitboxes out. If I think like Chip in this example was going to try to hit Far Slash against Ram, hitting my own Far Slash preemptively would be controlling that space. Space control is very important because it's kind of the first step of how neutral is played, because that is the problem that you are presenting to the opponent. Me as the Ram player, when I am doing this, I'm saying you have to deal with this, right? This is my space, I'm controlling it, you have to do something to make me stop doing that. The downside to space control is that you are being preemptive with your actions, right? You're not reacting, you're not waiting for something, you're just saying, I think you're going to try to approach now, and pressing your button. I think you're going to run up and hit Far Slash now, so I'm going to try to put my button out preemptively. Putting yourself out preemptively is obviously putting yourself at risk, and it's something your opponent can take advantage of. The way you take advantage of that is with the second part of the RPS, which is whiff punishing. So whiff punishing is the act of having your opponent whiff their move, and then you whiff punish them for it, right? Just like that. Whiff punishing is very strong because it is in most cases a very reactive decision. Whenever you can do something reactively in a fighting game, it is better than otherwise because you're not taking a preemptive action. With space control, I was just explaining how taking a preemptive action is a risk, whereas if you're looking to play reactively, you're not taking as much of a risk because you're not throwing something out preemptively. Makes sense, right? Now you can whiff punish kind of, preemptively, right? You can try to do like a delayed button in neutral or something to catch like a faster normal, right? Like if Ram was going to do like 2k or 5k, I can't really react to those, so you can try to like delay a button to whiff punish them, but the concept is still there, right? There's other ways to whiff punish too. Obviously, like if I think Ram is going to hit Far Slash, something I can do is air dash over it, right? That's a form of whiff punishing as well. So whiff punishing is really strong because it's overall a safe way to approach neutral, and it's a way to punish somebody for trying to control the space in front of them in a relatively safe manner. So what is the downside to whiff punishing? How do you deal with someone that's just whiff punishing you all the time? The way you deal with that is the third part of the RPS, which is approaching. The thing about looking to whiff punish is that usually you have to play pretty stationary, or you have to back up a lot to make the move whiff. Usually space control tools are like bigger buttons like Ram Far Slash or 5H. If you want those to whiff, you have to back up a lot, right? Which means you are giving up space. It's the exact opposite of space control. So if you recognize that your opponent is whiff punishing you a lot, you probably have to be more aggressive about taking the space that they're giving you. If Chip is backing up a lot, I'm going to try to take that space that he's giving me and push him towards the corner and take advantage that way. Sometimes the way that you whiff punish can also be just taking space. So like if Ram whiffs something like Far Slash, maybe instead of just hitting her for it, depending on, some characters are worse at whiff punishing than others, maybe I can't hit her for it, but what if I just take the space and make her block something afterwards, right? Those are kind of things that go hand in hand. That's like whiff punishing and approaching at the same time. How do you beat someone that's approaching you? That goes back to the first step of the RPS, which is you start using space control tools. You start pressing buttons preemptively to control the space in front of you. And that forms the RPS that is fighting game neutral. When you understand how this RPS is, you can start looking at how your different tools play into that RPS. So like I was saying, for space control tools, usually things like Ram Far Slash are good for it because they're long, they're disjointed, they have a lot of range. The downside to them is that they're usually longer startup and they have longer recovery. Characters that are good at whiff punishing are characters with fast mobility, characters with fast buttons like Chip Far Slash, or even characters with fast K buttons are good for whiff punishing. Maybe not actually hitting the character, but causing them to have to block something after whiffing is a win in of itself. And then characters that are good at approaching are obviously characters with fast movement speed and fast buttons as well. So you can start getting an idea of how all of these things start looking when you actually are playing a fighting game. And all sorts of tools can apply to this. Just to give some examples, something like Mei's Dolphin can be a really good approaching option because she just kind of bursts over to you very quickly and it's safe on block. There are some tools that can fall under all three, right? And that's something that's very important to keep in mind about this discussion, is that it's not just the tools themselves, it's about how people use them. Let's talk about Leo 5K, which is actually one of the most versatile moves in the game. Leo 5K can be used for space control because it's a forward advancing, relatively active move that controls the space right in front of Leo. Leo 5K can also be an amazing whiff punish tool. Someone whiffs a normal and neutral, boom, they're whiff punished, right? Leo's a fast character, 5K is an advancing normal, it's great for whiff punishing. Someone's looking to whiff punish you, right? They want to whiff punish like your Far Slash or your 2S or something. There, you're in, right? It's an approach option as well. So you don't want to just look at tools as like, okay, this is only used for that. You need to be considering how people are using moves as well. If you're getting hit by something in neutral, consider what the intent is that the opponent has when they're using that move. Neutral can be a very confusing part of the game because, like I said, there's so many different things that you have to consider. But when you start looking at them and you start thinking about how they play into this RPS that I just explained, you can really simplify the situations you get yourself into and can pinpoint better what you should be doing in these situations. Very often when I'm helping a player figure out a problem that they're having in neutral, it's because they either don't understand this RPS or they're not representing one part of it enough. Which is another difficult part about this too, is that there's no one size fits all to this type of thing. You can't just say like, okay, you have to represent 30-30, 30-30, 30-30, right? It's not like that. It's going to change depending on the player that you're playing, the matchup that you're playing. It's something that you have to constantly adjust and be adapting to your opponent with, but understanding it in the first place is going to help you with that process extremely. I will say easily the hardest part that a lot of players have difficulty with in regards to this triangle of options is the approaching part, because many players, especially like mid-level players, either overrepresent approaching or they vastly underrepresent it. One of the hardest things in a fighting game is being willing to approach your opponent. It's obviously scary to thrust yourself over towards the opponent. You don't want to do that. It sounds kind of spooky. At the same time, there's some players that do it way too much and don't think about their own well-being. I'm sure we have all fought plenty of players that are like that. So sometimes you have to be more willing to just sit back and look to whiff punish something or just control the space in front of you. Naturally, if you're approaching a lot, you're going to get somebody to start swinging a lot. Once they start swinging, you just hang back and let them swing their button and then you whiff punish them for it, right? So you got to make sure you're keeping the balance and you're thinking about what you're doing. If you're trying to practice to improve your neutral, the biggest things you need to be asking yourself is what is giving you issues in neutral? Are people approaching you too easily? Do you have issues stopping people from just running at you? Are you getting whiff punished too often? Do you feel like you're constantly getting hit when you're trying to approach people? It's always some balance of this triangle of options that you're missing out on. You either need to just have a better balance of these three things, or you need to consider what part of your toolkit is good for what part of this triangle, if that makes sense. Also, something I want to note about this is that I make it sound like there's this like perfect flow of these trio of options, right? Like you start out controlling space and then you whiff punish and then you approach. When you're playing a fighting game, especially when it's like two good players playing, it's not like that. It's going to be a constant mix of these three things being represented different amounts. The real difficulty of this is being able to adjust to it in real time. So that's pretty much how I explain simplifying neutral. I think if you think about things this way and really start looking at your matches, it should be very helpful for you. Of course, if you have any questions or any comments on the video, or if there's any things you'd like me to tackle in a future video, please let me know in the comments below. I love helping people. I love doing educational videos. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. It really helps me out, and also consider dropping a like. It's very helpful for videos, and I am really trying to grow the YouTube, so I would appreciate it. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.